Hello and welcome to Matrix Live. It's winter, it's dark, it's cold, sometimes even muddy. So, how about a little joy and nostalgia to cheer ourselves up? Today, we're talking about Wormgine, an online game based on Matrix that we're going to demo at the end of the episode. It's a clone of the Worms game that some of us grew up with, and its creator is Hotshot himself, that many of you already know. Hotshot, welcome. Can you introduce yourself for people who don't already know you?
Hello. I'm sure lots of people don't. I guess I'm Harshit. I'm formerly of sort of Bridges Land these days and doing more random projects such as this. Yeah, it's all nostalgia driven, but yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So this is something you are doing on your free time. This is not something you are doing on work time.
Yeah, this is like very much a departure from what I usually do. I guess people know for building things like GitHub bridges and that sort of thing, but I've always had a fascination building games. It's always been a thing I like to do for fun, I suppose. And I thought it would be kind of cool if we took Matrix and put a game in it, right, just to see what would happen. Because a lot of people talk about that and going, "Well, that sounds ridiculous. Why would you do that?" And so that's why I've done it.
All right. So can you tell us a bit more about Wormgine itself?
Yeah, so it came from a passion project. Me and a bunch of friends usually play Worms on Armageddon, the classic 1999 game, which uses, in fact, RSC for its networking, some of it, as well as just some TCP bits as well. And basically, that felt like a good way to introduce Matrix in the sense that I wanted to rebuild the game, but not just rebuild the game, but rebuild it with modern technologies and like a more accessible front. Because it's a great game, but it's not particularly accessible to people in terms of you have to go and download a game physically, and then you had to set up like an IP address and stuff, and then you had to connect to this RC channel. All this stuff is all a bit ridiculous. I was like, we can make this better while keeping the core the same.
All right. So we said that the game is interacting with Matrix. How is it interacting with Matrix actually?
So pretty much the entire networking stack is on top of Matrix because it maps really nicely to this kind of thing. Your online account you have with a game is just your Matrix account, obviously. Matrix rooms are great for doing game lobbies because you can sort of negotiate the rules, you can set state, you can introduce your own teams, you can all that stuff works really nicely for Matrix lobby. And in fact, even like the actual gameplay itself, you'd say, oh, surely you can't do a real time game or a near real time game with a Matrix. But actually, if you tune things the right way, you can easily send events at the frequency required to have something like Worms just work. So that's what it does. So everything that happens on the online stage happens through Matrix. There is no external server component. There is no customization of any kind on the server side.
All right. So it's fair to call you a Matrix engineer. Are you trying to make this game a Matrix problem? Are you using Matrix for the gimmick, or does it provide useful feature?
So it has its uses, like as in the SDKs on the client side are very stable. JS's case been around for years, and it's a very good SDK for this kind of thing. The server's very mature. All that stuff just sort of works out of the box synchronization layers. So Matrix provides a really nice way to send JSON between each other, and that's essentially what this is doing. It's sending packets of JSON of some authoritative layer to say whose state is like the real state, that kind of thing. Um, I'm sort of using Matrix to save myself writing a server because I feel that that's extra work I have to do. I could use something like a different technology, perhaps, but at this point, I know Matrix, as you said, I've been doing it a couple of years, maybe. I don't know. It feels like a while, so it's a safe thing for me to use, I suspect.
All right, so it's a vanilla server, a home server. You didn't have to customize anything about it.
Nope, it's just Synapse. I mean, it's using my own cluster, so my own database, so it's fairly well tuned to this kind of thing. I'm still not using Husher.uk because I value my communications. I'm not going to lie, this is not like a couple of events a second. This is more, so it's quite rapid. So there is a dedicated server, but there's no modules or any kind because I kind of want to see how far you can push what we currently have. I want to see how far I can really push before you need to start introducing customizations.
All right. So rewinding a little, you're using both the eventually consistent distributed database feature via the room state. You mentioned
Yep.
state a bit earlier. We're talking about matrix states, but you're also relying on sync to send ordered information to the clients.
Yep.
What are the other specs? So was matrix the only alternative, or can you
Oh, no,
use
no.
something else?
There are tons. There's various ways, like socket.io as a way to connect one. If you write your own server, you can connect your clients through that. There are many ways to do sort of your WebSockety type sort of server connection thing. XMPP is probably like the closest alternative to this, right? Because it's probably Matrix E in the sense that you can send stuff to each other in a relatively sort of peer-to-peerish fashion, in the sense that there's no server doing too much work on the events. You can set with clients to talk to each other through that mesh. And it'd probably be slightly faster because there's less overhead and it's essentially a consistent part of it. But also, I mean, there's two halves. This one side is I know Matrix, like, back of my hand sort of levels. So it might as well use the thing I know than the thing I've got to learn. If you're building a game, one of the things you tend to find very quickly is it's difficult, especially with doing from the ground up. The last thing you do is introduce uncertainty and doubt and things. So, in fact, this game was actually built the game first and networking was second. So the Matrix layer came in the last 2 weeks. So I didn't want to at that point introduce a whole new thing to the stack. There's already quite a lot of new things for me. But the other thing that's interesting is, in theory, you could replace Matrix with something else if you wanted to. It is not impossible at some point in the future. I do a hybrid model where it's Matrix plus some sort of WebSockety front end for the real-time stuff if I get frustrated with it. But right now, I was actually happily surprised that Matrix is really fast for this stuff, like faster than you'd expect for something like a game.
Right. So you said earlier that you were using a vanilla Matrix server. So it means that I can use any server to run the game.
Yeah, you could use any Matrix implementation. You could use Conduit. You could use Dendra. You could use anything else you like just to run this. You could use Matrix.org. You could actually play this game right now from Matrix.org. Although what you quickly find is that the rate limits would hit you hard like a brick to the face. So what you do need to do is, of course, make sure your rate limits are suitable. One of the things I plan to do is reduce the amount of cost for this, because I believe I'm probably seeing far too many events what's going on. But for the time being, just to get the demo out there, hit the rate limits up a bit and just make a dedicated server. But yeah, you could right now install this, output your rate limits, and play this with anybody. It'd be fine.
So when you say far too many events, does it add a significant load on the home server?
Not as such, because we're not doing many state changes. The state changes are very far and routine. It's sort of that's the bit you do to your configuration. Once you're playing, it's just sending events backwards and forwards. So there is a cost, but to be honest with you, it's not hundreds of hertz of messages. It's more like a few hertz. And in fact, only one player is ever talking at once, because in the Wormgine course, it's turn-based. So you're only ever getting one client talking and sort of broadcasting out to other players. So really, the load is not that bad. I'm running this in a very small VM on my server, and there's no load issues.
All right. So a Matrix game sounds fun, and I can see deployments where you have Matrix for your corporate deployment. For example, this is what we use at Element, but I know we are not the only ones. I know, for example, the French government uses CHAP. Do you have plans for a widget integration? Because I would love to see a widget with that in a watercolor room where everybody can just have fun.
I would love to convince Element to add this game to their app store on the widget integration store and say, can we add this as another extension? Yeah, it's clearly the way this should go, right? Is you can talk. It's similar to how Discord do it now, in fact, where you can have a game inside your chat and you can say, let's all play a game. And I think actually there's something I'd like to see in Matrix as well, is the ability to say, right, we're all in a room together. We've all got a connectivity layer together. Let's just spawn in a HTML window. Sorry, that's just sort of a browser window to play the game, right? Like, this could easily run in a widget. The only reason it's not done so is the rate limiting requirements is a bit tricky, and time. But it would not be difficult to do this, assuming you can just render random 3D things inside your window, because it's all WebGL based. But I'm sure you can do that.
All right. You mentioned a bit earlier that the game, well, you need to have a quite fast home server, and
Yeah.
you don't need to be rate limited. Is it possible to play the game over Federation? Can I join with my Matrix AD?
You
Is it
could.
going to be a problem?
You could. I mean, there is nothing physically stopping the game from running a Federation. It is purely the speed of your network connection. And obviously, looking at your servers and all that, I suspect it would be horrendously slow and a bit dodgy. But I mean, it would technically work. I would like to see how we can make this work in the future. It'd be one of the things I'd like to see next, because the idea you could run your own home server and run a game over at somebody else's home server is just crazy, right? How cool would that be?
All right. So actually, can we have a live demo of the game?
Sure. I can do a screen share.
Yes, please.
Well, I can attempt. Let's have a go. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Cool. I don't know if you can join. I have no idea if that's worked for you at all. Did you want to give it a go, or should I just play a single player one to prove our concept?
I don't know if I want to ridicule myself in front of the whole audience. Can you play by yourself?
Yeah, I can do that. So this is cheating slightly, because this is the single player component, but you can sort of imagine as if this would be played with a Matrix, and that's just fine. So you can sort of see here you have a basics of a Worms game. This is all written sort of, it's got so there's no like game engine as such. It's just a bunch of sort of presentation layer and physics layer and that stuff bolted together. And it's going to be very loud. Also, trying to play while talking is difficult.
To be entirely fair, I tried to play the game before we recorded the episode,
Yeah.
and it's really difficult to aim correctly, or I'm terrible. I don't know.
It might be that I have not tuned this perfectly. One of the hardest things will be trying to figure out how to get the feel just right, because there's a sense of how to get this completely good. But
Well, you're doing much better than I do.
I am playing against myself, so in some ways it's impossible for me to actually lose. Um, yes, and some of the weapons are tuned differently. But what I would like to see out of this is if people have given this a go. I want to see if other people in Matrix run their own homes or something. I'll see how it feels to play this, because I've been playing against myself, and But what will happen, of course, is I'll somehow lose against myself.
So what I'm seeing from the game is that the map seems to be very basic. Is it something, if I'm really into that kind of game, can I create my own map for it?
Yeah, all you really need is an image editor and the tiled map editor, which is an open source program, usually for tiled games, so sort of isometric or something of that nature. But I literally made this in Basic Creator and then just put it into tiled, and that's it. So all these maps are actually, they're not hard coded, they're asset files. So anybody right now can have their own thing. And actually, this is like the fourth or fifth map I've made for this. So essentially, you can, all the customizations there. And in fact, part of the core of this is that I wanted to make it a community first approach so that people can PR in their own things. I didn't want it to be a case where everyone had to spend a lot of effort to add their own stuff, because I think the whole core of a game like this, I'm eventually going to be able to win this, I promise. but the core of this, I think, is that people should be able to add their own content. I'd love the idea if you could add like your own file into a room and then immediately turn it into a map. How cool would it be if you could upload like a map, click on it, and then say play this inside Wormgine or something like that? Like, that would be brilliant.
Yeah,
And I think,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the most fun I've had with this sort of game has actually been when we've made our own maps for each other and played them. Like, there's more fun in that, I think, than just the combat. It's just, oh dear, talking place is terrible. But yeah. But usually what happens is we basically open up an image, which I had to make some stuff out of it and just play in the maps together, and you can have so much of a laugh with that. I think it's a bit of a lost thing these days.
Yeah, I'm also seeing those little characters when I first played the game, and I was like, are they grenades or something?
Oh, so, these are grenades, which I've just repurposed as character models, because I've still not got around to sorting out some art for this, because all this art is stuff I've made, as you can tell.
So yeah, I was wondering if somebody is really good at designing assets, for example, is it possible to swap the assets with something new? Like, for example, to make a game where instead of grenades fighting each other, you have foxes fighting each other, for example.
Yeah, so actually, you can easily do that. So all the assets are built in as an asset file. You just hit one script to reload the assets, and it just imports them straight in. It does all the hitboxing itself, so really, you could add anything. In fact, you could add weapons, you could add items, all this stuff. All the stuff in this game is very modular, because I'm a programmer first and engineer first, a game designer second. So my first instinct was everything should be, abstracted away. One of the things I'd like to do when this community really gets going is add documentation how to make your own extensions to this game. Possibly because it's JavaScript, just import the assets at runtime. So if you wanted to show your friends a new weapon, you could load it in. The whole point of this, I think, in fact, using Matrix is actually a lot of this will be file sharing, in the sense that you share assets with each other. Of course, you'd have to trust your friends not to send you horrible, like nasty JavaScript executable things. But in theory, it'd be quite fun that you could have a new small snippet of code to send to each other to play a game a bit differently. It's a community game first and foremost.
Well, so you mentioned the community and the fact that it's open source and that people can basically change the game to their own needs. I suppose you'd be interested in helping hands. So how can people get involved? Are there priorities, Matrix room that people need to join? Do you
yeah.
mainly
All the usual stuff. Yeah. So there's a Matrix room, #Wormgine at harshad.uk. I'll probably put this into them later so people who don't have it can find it. But also, yeah, it's free software since day one. Everything that I've ever made for this is open source. All the documentation, all the assets, every line of code's all there. There's nothing private, so anyone can have a go. There's a bug tracker I'm working on that's trying to fill in every possible thing he's worked on, so a whole list of things to work on. So I'm hoping people can just pick up things as they want to go and have a go of it. And yeah, the only thing I'd like to do with this is eventually abstract away the game stuff into its own library for Matrix. So I'd really like an SDK for game developers to sort of use the lobby stuff from this, maybe the networking layers, so they don't have to do the things I did of trying to build the actual networking bit. Because It'd be a cool asset to the Matrix and probably even the Foundation to have an SDK you can say, right, developers, use this, go make some games and come back to us. I think that'd be quite cool.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Is there anything you want the world to know about this game or anything else?
No, I want them to have a good weekend.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you for putting some fun in Matrix again. And I see you next week. Matrix Live.